The Sami people believe that all natural objects possess a soul. They are the descendants of nomadic tribes that have lived in Northern Europe for thousands of years. They herd reindeer and typically migrated in units of 5 or 6 families. They are indigenous because they descended from peoples that inhabited this region long before the current borders were drawn. But do they possess a country? Are they autonomous? And are they oppressed like so many other indigenous communities around the world? The Sami people have long fascinated its neighbors. Today, tourists marvel over the beauty of their ways and thinking. Their colorful clothes, traditional music. They are believed to have settled these lands over 10,000 years ago, from Western Europe. As the Ice Age came to an end, they followed the retreating ice up north. Later, other people from Siberia joined them. This was long before the Scandinavian and Finnish people settled here, but their language is close to Finnish and is only spoken here, in Hungary, and in some parts of Siberia. Survival in the high Arctic is tough. Every day for a period of 51 days, the sun never rises, and temperatures as low as 30 degrees below zero are still within average. The region that the Sami people inhabit is enormous. It's larger than Germany, but only about 75,000 Sami people live here. Most live in small settlements that range between a few dozen and a few thousand inhabitants. The vast majority lives in Norway, and smaller communities inhabit Sweden, Finland, and Russia. But the Sami aren't seeking to form an independent state. However, their history is riddled with oppression that cultivates its activism today, especially now in the wake of climate change. The first contact between the Sami and its neighbors was in the age of the Vikings. They had a thriving business of trade. They traded furs, foods, and even magic. The Vikings regarded the Sami people as highly skilled wizards that could change their fortune at sea. But this friendly cooperation ended in the Middle Ages. The emerging nations to their east and south were competing for control over the land. They wanted to show their dominion over the north and started by demanding taxes, often in the form of fur and food. This led the Sami people to sometimes have to pay taxes in 3 states at the same time. These emerging countries then motivated their people to settle up north, offering generous benefits to anybody willing to move. Tax breaks, military exemption, and perhaps best of all, they could exploit the riches of their land. The cultural differences between the Sami and their neighboring states were perceived as a threat. Each of these countries aimed to prove that the land is theirs, and thus a dark period in Sami history began. The Nordic countries separately began converting the Sami people to Christianity. They aimed to eradicate all sorcery and burned thousands of traditional shaman drums. As a result, today only about 70 remain. The new borders were drawn and restricted the movement of the Sami people, which translated in overgrazing. They couldn't move freely, and as a result, their reindeer were slaughtered en masse. Their nation-state sent them to boarding schools. Their language was banned and culture suppressed. This forced assimilation went on well into the 20th century. In the 1930s, Russia was offering privileges to Sami people that were willing to give up their language and nomadic lifestyle. If they refused, they could be sent to prison camps on the Solovetsky Islands. These are just a few of the many examples in which the Nordic countries and Russia completely disregarded the opinion of the Sami people. Today, some of this remains, but much has improved. In Norway, their language was allowed again in schools in the 1930s. In the 1980s and 90s, the Sami people formed a political entity, and the Norwegian constitution acknowledged their responsibility to help them preserve Sami language, culture, and way of life. Other countries also made significant advances. The Sami also have a parliament in Sweden. They are requested to investigate the effects of its policies toward the Sami throughout history, and this has been granted. They are currently heading the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. Finland pays a relatively high level of attention to indigenous rights. Between the Nordic countries, they have the smallest amount of Sami living within its borders, but they were the first to establish an elected Sami delegation. The Sami in Russia don't have a parliament, but they are organized into NGOs. Their rights are protected by regional and national laws, and their cultural identity is on the rise since the fall of the Soviet Union. But the fight for their rights is long from over. The United Nations in 2016 raised the alarm about mining. They found that especially the Norwegian and Swedish extractive industries often fail to consider Sami land rights.
A group of Sami activists blocked the access road to the new Beowulf mine to prevent exploratory blasting in the area, an area on the Arctic Circle where Sweden's indigenous Sami population herd their reindeers.
There is still plenty of racism against Sami people in all of its nation states. This is sometimes directed at their reindeer.
I let my reindeer loose here and a man drove up and said, "You don't come here with your reindeer or we'll shoot them. We've already shot 7 or 8, and if I meet you alone in the forest, I'll shoot you too."
Their traditional way of life is threatened by logging, construction, and urban growth. Things are both bad and better. There has been tremendous progress, and progress still needs to be made. There is strong cooperation between Sami people, but now they're facing a wholly different challenge.
Scientists say the Arctic is warming up twice as fast as the average global rate, putting the Sami on the front lines of climate change. It's being felt particularly keenly in ancient forests like this, where lichen growing on the ground provides food for reindeer, an animal now facing mass starvation.
As the ice sheets on the Arctic are melting, it exposes more of the ocean surface. The warmer water heats up the air and contributes to the rest of the ice melting even faster. This feedback loop contributes to the Arctic warming many times faster than the rest of the world.
Our tundra is changing. It is growing trees where there should be none.
Today Sweden is placing almost all of their windmill parks up on Sami territory, just exploiting it again, destroying it again, making our lands into these huge industrial parks.
Within the European Union, there's only one indigenous population, and those are the Sami. They are of tremendous cultural and historic value, one deserving of preservation. There are many other peoples without a nation. Check out my previous video about Western Sahara next by clicking on the video in the top right corner, and subscribe to my channel if you don't want to miss the start of the next series.